Picture in your mind a lonely rooftop somewhere in Japan. The main character yawns and stretches as he heads back to bed, glowing with a smile from the praise that he received from his senpai earlier in the day. The stars glitter down on him. A fairly standard manga scene, one you've probably seen in most of the manga that you've ever read. What makes this one special? Well, this is one of the scenes that opens Kafka's story in chapter 24 of Kaiju Number 8. If you remember, this is right before the wyvern-type kaiju pull out their cometary attack, and the battle with Kaiju Number 10 starts. So, what's special about this? This is the connection point, the pivot point for my entire video today. I did a previous video that described how this scene, this set of scenes at the beginning of chapter 4, tied together with chapter 1. Unbeknownst to me, this wasn't just the end of that connection, this was the beginning of an entire another set of connections, which we're going to go into in this video. So, why is this scene so important? I'll see you on the other side of the introduction to find out. Hello my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today we're going to take a look at the wonderful way that Matsumoto weaves his stories together and creates a world that just feels so real. Every single event in Matsumoto's work references something that came before and something that will come after. And it doesn't just do this in one way, but in many ways. So this is what I like to call the C.S. Lewis rule. It's how you take a very common story concept and elevate it to a good or even a great story. Don't worry about being original. Do your work well, and originality will come. So this is part 3 of the series, where we look at only three of the elements that Matsumoto has woven into the story so far that really come to a head and are illustrated in chapter 65 in the final scene between Kafka and Vice Captain Hoshina on the training ground in the Defense Force base. And this video will be focusing on the relationship between Kafka and Hoshina. So when this story started, we didn't know Vice Captain Hoshina existed. We knew that Kafka had a childhood friendship with Mina, Captain Ashuro, and that Kafka's goal, his driving force, the thing that produced his value for the Defense Force, was to get into Captain Ashiro's and stand by her side. But in order to do that, he's going to have to go through Vice Captain Hoshina, we learn. And we just see this relationship blossom. And just as Kafka's value to the Defense Force grows and changes between chapters 1 and 65, and just as his reason to fight grows and changes during chapters 1 through 65, Kafka's relationship with Vice Captain Hoshina also grows and changes through these chapters. And again, it's all tied together. Everything touches everything else. The brilliance of Matsumoto's writing style is that when you read a panel, you feel that these people, these places are real. That if you turned the corner and lost track of the main storyline, you'll get to see the other characters that you've come to care for doing their own things off in the background. So, how did Matsumoto tie this all together with Kafka and Vice Captain Hoshina's relationship? Well, from the very first, when we see Vice Captain Hoshina, we start to learn things about him. He seems to have taken on, in his role as Captain Ashiro's second in command, all of the training duties for the new recruits. Captain Ashiro does not have the best people skills, and so it's the second in command's duty to train up the new recruits. It's his job to do everything in his power to make Captain Ashiro's job as easy as possible. And this might not be the relationship between all captains and seconds in command in the Defense Force, but that definitely is the relationship that Hoshina has carved himself out in the 3rd Division. Now, there's some basic backstory that's really relevant to Hoshina's story. I assume you all know Kafka's backstory, but to remind you of Vice Captain Hoshina's backstory. Vice Captain Hoshina was a sword prodigy as a child. He comes from a long line of kaiju slayers, and their technique before the advancement of ranged technology was to go in with blades with swords and chop the kaiju up. But since the development of the human technology allowed them to start fighting these kaiju, the kaiju have advanced and it's become an arms race. And when Vice Captain Hoshina was training, when he was moving up the ranks, he kept being told again and again, as a child by his father, as a recruit as a cadet by his commanders, you'll never be able to go into active combat. Kaiju are just too big, too strong. Swords are no good in active combat today. And but Vice Captain Hoshina kept fighting, kept putting in the effort, kept pushing himself to his limit to be useful, to achieve his goal. And then he gets requested by Captain Ashiro, and she not only does not try to dismiss his abilities, she tells him that they're necessary. And the consequence of having had his abilities put down as useless for all those years left Vice Captain Hoshina with a significant mental scar. And a scar that Captain Ashiro was able to not heal, but definitely compensate for, because now, according to his own words in the combat scene between chapters 23 and 32, Vice Captain Hoshina considers his ability to serve Mina Ashiro the only thing that proves his existence, his ability to line up the shots for her. So he goes in with his swords and he harries the larger kaiju until it's standing still enough for Captain Ashiro to blast it with that massive cannon of hers. This is the mentality we have with Vice Captain Hoshina when the Tachikawa base training arc happens. Now, he would have heard of Kafka, but when looking at the paperwork, apparently Mina had not told Vice Captain Hoshina anything about her friendship with Kafka Haibino. It was just something she kept quiet to herself. So, the Vice Captain just looks at Kafka's paperwork, probably notes he's an older applicant, he's failed multiple times, and brings him into the testing situation. Then we have the relationship beginning there in the room where Kafka is being tested for his compatibility with the kaiju weaponry, and it's revealed that he has a 0. This is the first time Vice Captain Hoshina actually pays attention to Kafka, because that is so shockingly unusual to get a 0. Then Vice Captain Hoshina also notices how good of a team player Kafka is during the training, and then expresses regret when he believes that Kafka's down for the count after getting smacked by the smaller kaiju. Then we have the first true interaction of their relationship. The first time that the Vice Captain is talking sincerely to Kafka, trying to communicate with him, and when Kafka is expressing himself to the Vice Captain. Kafka has just been smacked by the kaiju that came out of nowhere, and Vice Captain Hoshina sees that his vitals are weird. He probably has internal injuries, and Vice Captain Hoshina is trying to rein Kafka in, pull him back, bring him under control. And Kafka basically says, "No, sir, please let me continue. I have my dreams. I have to go on." And the Vice Captain shrugs and says, "Okay, whatever, go for it." He sort of washes his hands of this situation. Now this scene right here, that communication with Vice Captain Hoshina in the control room speaking to Kafka as a disembodied voice over the radios, warning Kafka that he's in danger, and then washing his hands of the situation when Kafka, for fairly selfish reasons, his goal is standing by Mina Ashiro's side, decides to go on and continue at the risk of his own life. Then, of course, the whole thing happens, and we get to see a defining moment of Vice Captain Hoshina's character as an officer, when the moment that he sees how powerful the revived Hanjo is, He says the only ones who could take care of something like that would be me or Captain Ashiro, and they both instantly go out to do what they think is going to be taking on an incredibly dangerous kaiju. So we have an established character dynamic between Vice Captain Hoshina and Captain Ashiro, and then you have this wild card of Kafka being thrown into the mix. At this point, Vice Captain Hoshina doesn't know about the relationship between Kafka and Captain Ashiro, but you have that scene where he's talking to Kafka, and he says, "Come in, you're injured, this is dangerous." And that scene is going to be mirrored in chapter 65, where Kafka, he's out on a training field once more, and there is a kaiju out there with him, even though it's just a little guy curled up inside of a major organ. And again, you have the vice captain coming up to address him, but instead of being just a distant, half-distracted voice in the distance, the vice captain comes up to him and deals with him personally and says, "Look, there's something wrong with your vitals. There's something wrong inside of you. Don't worry about this. I'll take care of it." It's a much more deeply personal, intimate moment between the two of them, but it is a beautiful mirror of what happened way back during the training arc. So we have the first and as of chapter 65, the last interaction between Kafka and Vice Captain Hoshina really being defined by this relationship. Vice Captain Hoshina takes out his hand, puts it on Kafka, and basically says, "Chill. You've done enough. You're stressed. You stressed your body to the limit. Something's wrong. Let me handle this." And instead of just washing his hands and stepping aside, when Kafka inevitably says, "No, sir, I have to keep going," and when Kafka says this, it's now for a far less selfish reason. This isn't about standing beside Mina's side anymore. This is about protecting his loved ones and preventing the suffering that he sees in the eyes and tears of his loved ones. He says, I can't just quit. I can't leave this up to other people. I have this ability and I have to go on. It's a far more selfless, self-sacrificing statement request on Kafka's side. And in response to this, the vice captain doesn't just say, "Well, okay, that's your choice." He steps forward and says, "Well, then let me train you." And we're already at 11 minutes. There's so much more to go into. So this is going to be a slightly longer video. I didn't realize it would take this long, but that's just how detailed Matsumoto's storytelling is. So that is the connection woven through the story between the training arcs in chapters 4 to 9 and this final scene in chapter 65. You have these bookends on Kafka and Vice Captain Hoshina's relationship. These scenes that are so similar and their very differences show the character growth that we've seen over these past 50-odd chapters. Then you have the visual weaving. In chapter 1, you have Kafka just kind of focusing on Kafka. In chapter 1, Kafka's, at the end of the day, he's alone in his apartment. But when Vice Captain Hoshina comes up, we never see Kafka just kind of like alone there at the end of the day again. You get these visual representations of the night. And once this relationship is integrated, once Kafka has Vice Captain Hoshina in his corner, as it were, when Kafka's staying up late studying, Vice Captain Hoshina is either watching him or interacting with him. You have the scene before the attack of the fungal kaiju, the big scene that kind of defines their rivalry, when Vice Captain Hoshina comes upon Kafka in the library and basically braces him for wanting to be Mina's second in command. He says, "Well, so you're gunning for my job, are you?" And of course you have that manly thing where Kafka stands up and tells him to his face, "Yes, sir, that's exactly what I'm doing." And you can tell that Vice Captain Hoshina does have a strong emotional reaction to this. And so he tosses down the keys and says, "Okay, you're on. Do your best. Do your worst." Now, remember, this is already after Vice Captain Hoshina suspected Kafka, because from the beginning of their relationship, Vice Captain Hoshina had a very slight suspicion that Kafka was related to not necessarily Kaiju Number 8, but to something related with Kaiju Number 8. Because Vice Captain Hoshina had noted that Kafka's vital signs had dropped off the radar when Kaiju Number 8 signal appeared. So from Vice Captain Hoshina's perspective, he was always coming in as a spy. I think that's going to sour Vice Captain Hoshina's relationship with Kafka, even going forward in the manga, even though they've, at least on the surface level, dealt with the fact that Kafka basically lied to him, and Vice Captain Hoshina only allowed him on the defense force so he could keep an eye on him. Those are some of the main storytelling arcs going forward. But what this video is about, and what I'm trying to focus on, is the artistic and writing elements that tie all these chapters together. And again, going back to that what I call the Starry Night effect. Again and again, Matsumoto presents us with the image of Kafka after hours, Kafka in the dark, Kafka under a starry sky. Before Kafka joined the defense force, these scenes happened first when he was alone. After that first disposal day we see him do, he goes back to his own apartment. You can see the stars outside of his window, but they're hidden behind curtains. He's alone, he's isolated, he's slovenly, he's entirely focused on his own selfish goals, and he's struggling to find contentment in his life. Then you see it again once he's with Reno, and that's kind of a change, the night that he transforms. Then you see that Starry Night again motif in chapters leading up to the fungal kaiju attack, where Vice Captain Hoshina met Kafka in the library. After that interaction, Kafka is once more out there under the starry night, looking up at the sky, contemplating his life, but he's much more satisfied. His interaction with Vice Captain Hoshina, the Vice Captain saying, "I have faith in at least 1% of you," has put Kafka in a great mood. He's now part of the community. He's not hiding from the stars. He's out under the stars. And then you have the Wyvern Kaiju attack, and Kafka is immediately able to be of assistance to Vice Captain Hoshina again by offering him the information on the Wyvern Kaiju and the as of yet unknown more powerful kaiju that's controlling them. So this is really cementing Kafka's ability to be of service to Vice Captain Hoshina, kind of cementing their relationship. Then you see the battle, and Kafka has to reveal himself. And you just see how, in the background, just as a minor part of those panels, you just see how utterly shell-shocked Vice Captain Hoshina is. And you get to just hear him say, "I wanted to be suspicious of you, but I was taken in by your charm." And the last thing we see of this relationship before the story arc shifts into the big combat scenes with Kaiju Number 9 and the First Division is that we see Kafka in chains. And we see that a deeply shell-shocked Vice Captain Hoshina is the one standing watch over him. At this point, Vice Captain Hoshina has gone days without sleep. He overheated his uniform. He got punched and crushed by the blow from Kaiju Number 10. His entire body is wrapped in bandages, but he still was there watching over Kafka. And I did the video on that chapter. I called it what the Vice Captain thought was going to be his last act of protection and support for one of his underlings who he was pretty sure was going to be dissected shortly. Then they don't get to interact until chapter 65, when you have that confrontation scene. And not only is this another Starry Night style illustration with Kafka out training after dark under the stars, showing that he's pushing himself to be better, pushing himself to be the best that he can be, but you have another layer of connection. So back in chapters 19 through 20, after Kafka has rescued Reno and Aiharu from Kaiju Number 9, he had that fight as Kaiju Number 8 with Vice Captain Hoshina. And Vice Captain Hoshina starts off his attack with a vicious slash to the neck meant to decapitate the kaiju. And had Kaiju number 8, Kafka, not dodged that, it probably would have taken off his neck. And that visible attack, that strike forward with the blade, is a very visually distinctive thing. That shows up again when Kafka walks in on Vice Captain Hoshina training in after hours in the training room, and we kind of see it through Kafka's memory as Vice Captain Hoshina is doing the mental imagery training. That's when Vice Captain Hoshina shows two more elements that connect here to this scene in chapter 65. One, he's pushing himself and taking personal responsibility for the threat. He says, no other officer could take that out. I have to do it, which is a major element of Vice Captain Hoshina's relationship with all of his subordinates. He's very prone to taking responsibility. And it showed that visual, the attack, which was an attack that Vice Captain Hoshina was practicing to use on Kaiju number 8. So again, directly affecting their relationship there. It terrifies Kafka, but Kafka, being our main character, takes it in a wholesome manner and simply pledges his assistance to Vice Captain Hoshina. We see that strike again in chapter 65 when Vice Captain Hoshina, after greeting Kafka, springs forward and slaps him with the sword with exactly the same strike that he used back in chapter 19 to initiate the fight with Kaiju number 8, and the one that Kafka saw him using in the Defense Force training room back at the beginning of the Tachikawa base arc. So there we have it, the storytelling elements that lace through all of these groups of chapters, and the visual elements, the starry night factor, the slashing attack to the neck factor, and just the fact that both of these men have been trying their best to support each other and serve each other in the way that is really unique to the military setting, while at the same time carrying deep secrets from each other. Now, up to this point, that secret that was carried between them, and then the emotional blowback from the revelation of the secret, has been one of the major defining points of their relationship. But now, Vice Captain Hoshina knows everything Kafka knows, and while Kafka doesn't know that Vice Captain Hoshina suspected him, he already knew from the fact that Vice Captain Hoshina was likely to be the primary agent in neutralizing him. So essentially everything's out in the open. These two men can meet each other on equal footing, and their relationship will move forward with far less complications from that element. Now, when an author removes a major complication from a relationship, they generally either switch to focusing on a different one or add in another one. Now, it might just be that the author is getting ready to move us into the big challenge in their relationship, namely that Kafka is gunning for Vice Captain Hoshina's spot, but who knows? I think Matsumoto is a good enough writer to put in a sincere, realistic relationship challenge for Kafka and Vice Captain Hoshina, and I am looking forward to it because it's, one of those things where you want the story to make you suffer. So, what do you think of the relationship between Kafka and Vice Captain Hoshina? Could Matsumoto have done this any better? Leave a comment below telling me what you think. Hit that like and subscribe button, and peace out, my wonderful viewers. Humans are weird. We took a vote, and humans are weird. I have the data. 2 books in a series of human absurdity. Go check out these short story collections. What will our little green friends think of us when we finally do make it to space? Find out the answer in 2 books of human absurdity. Humans Are Weird, We Took a Vote, and Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and Google Play.